We're beginning the fourth Kiddush of Kiddush with regard to Kiddusha Rabbah. Now, this phrase Kiddusha Rabbah refers to Kiddush by day, and it's borrowed from the Gemara in Psachim Adaf Kuf Zayin, which we'll begin with now. As you know, we do not have Rashi on the last parak Arvei Psachim of Masechta Psachim. We have the Rashbam. So we'll learn through the Gemara, sort of highlighting it, and then we'll look in the Rashbam. And we're going to try to get a grasp of what motivates, what is the background and the purpose, the goal of Kiddusha Rabbah. After all, we recited Kiddush on Friday night. We had many Rishonim, almost unanimously amongst the Rishonim, that Kiddush at night on Leil Shabbos, B'Knisas HaShabbos, is Doraisa. And why would the Torah impose an additional Kiddush by day once we've already fulfilled Kiddush by night? And that question is so powerful that it's in the background, hovering over us the entire time, and will lead most of the Rishonim to the conclusion, not all Rishonim, that Kiddush by day is only D'Rabbanan, which will lead us to the question as to why the Rabbanan would have established, would have been Mesaken Kiddush by day if the Torah was happy with Kiddush at night. The Gemara here on Psachim Daf Kuf Vav, first of your pages, will bring a brisa, Tan Rabbanan, Zocher es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsha. And the brisa will focus on the word Yom, as opposed to Laila, and derive the conclusion that the mitzvah of Zocher es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsha applies by day, and we have to seek a special ribui to include Kiddush at night. And that's the simple reading, straightforward reading of the brisa. And the Gemara objects. How can you tell me that the Kiddush that the Torah had in mind was by day, and then find a ribui, some sort of extra pasuk to include at night, when the Iker Kiddush is at night? And the Gemara explains why the Iker Kiddush is at night. Let's see it inside. Torah Rabbanon, Zocher es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho, Zocher el Yayin. Ainli ela b'yom. The pasuk says, Zocher es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. So all I know here is that the Torah commands me to recite Kiddush by day. B'layla minayin, Talmud Lomer, Zocher es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. So the extra es Yom HaShabbos is coming to B'mar B'Layla. That's the language of the brisa as we have. The Gemara immediately objects. B'Layla minayin? Can the brisa be taken at face value? How do we know that this Kiddush at night? Talmud Lomer Zocher Yom Shabbos L'Kadsho B'Layla minayin adarab. On the contrary, Ikar Kiddusha B'Laylahu. It can't be that the Torah is referring to Kiddush by day, and we have to find a ribui in the pasuk to indicate an additional Kiddush at night, when the Iker Kiddush is by night. And the Gemara explains why. Dechi Kaddish Tchilas Yoma Boy L'Kiddushay. If you have to sanctify the day, then you sanctify the day from its beginning. And the beginning of the day is at night. So when the Shabbos enter, B'Knisaso, that's at night. And that's exactly when you would have to recite Kiddush to be Makadosh the entire 24 hours, beginning with the onset of Shabbos, and that's Kiddush at night. V'su, B'Layla minayin Tamalom Zocher es Yom, Tana Mahadra Alayla V'Kanosiv Le'Kra D'Yamama. The brisa makes no sense. You're trying to look for a pasuk to include Kiddush at night, and instead you bring a pasuk that says that you have to be Kaddish by day. And therefore, the Gemara sort of rewrites the brisa. And hachikama, this is the way we have to learn this brisa. Zocher Yom Shabbos L'Kadsho Zocher el Yayin B'Knisasa. And the pasuk now at simple pshat level refers to Knisasa, meaning the Kiddush at night. That's the Kiddush that the Torah had in mind. Find me some sort of a source in the pasuk that there's also Kiddush by day. Talmud Lomer Zochas Yom HaShabbos. And the word Yom is coming as a ribui for the extra Kiddush, which is in a sense a tag on to the main Kiddush. So that we know for sure that when the Torah asks us to be Zocher es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho, it means Kadsheu B'Knisasa. And hence the Torah requires Kiddush at night. We're going to derive from the word Yom HaShabbos a special ribui to add on another Kiddush, and that's a Kiddush by day. And two questions now arise. Number one, is that extra ribui of Yom a doraisa or it's a drabana? And question number two, what's the nature of a Kiddush by day if we've already fulfilled the Iker Kiddush b'knisaso at night? The Gemara doesn't address either of these two questions. Instead, the Gemara addresses a different issue, and that is my mevorech. What is the bracha of Kiddush by day? We know Kiddush at night has an entire bracha, which is called Kiddush.
Amex.
And now we want to know what constitutes the bracha of Kiddush by day. And the Gemara has an amazing answer. Omer Rabbi Yehuda, Borei Pri Hagofen. That's the beginning and the end. A Kiddush by day, which is comprised of one single bracha. And by the way, we're familiar with this bracha. What is the nature of this bracha as we know it? Outside the context of Kiddush, it's a birchas hanenin. A person wants to drink wine, he recites a borei pri hagofen. All of a sudden, that very same bracha becomes Kiddush. And there's nothing else in the Kiddush. You know, we have various minhagim. We add, some people read a whole machzor of psukim, before they recite Kiddush and borei pri hagofen. But that's post-Talmudic. As far as the Talmud is concerned, there's only one simple and very abridged Kiddush, and that's borei pri hagofen. That's the ganze business. Gemara doesn't know of any other psukim. Gemara now goes on to tell a story. We always like stories. Rav Ashi Iklo leMechuza. Rav Ashi was a guest in a city called Mechoza. Omrule, on Shabbos day, they said to Rav Ashi, Li Kaddish lanu mar, would our master please kindly recite Kiddush, Kiddusha Rabbah. Look at those two words. Kiddusha Rabbah, the great Kiddush. Havale, they gave him a cup of wine. He gets a little bit nervous here under the collar because they call this Kiddusha Rabbah. What should I say? What is Kiddusha Rabbah? It's not the same Kiddush that I recited last night and Friday night. Sover my niu Kiddusha Rabbah Omar Michti Kol Abrachos Kulam Borei Pri Hagofen Amri Bereisha. Whenever we begin a series of brachos, like we did last night on Friday night, we begin with Borei Pri Hagofen, and therefore Omar Borei Pri Hagofen. So he recited Borei Pri Hagofen. Chazilahi Saba. He sees from the corner of his eye an elderly gentleman, Degachin Vishasi, and he bent down, this older gentleman, to pick up the cup, and he drank from the yayin. It seems that Rav Ashi, after he recited Borei Pri Hagofen, he didn't even have a moment to drink the wine, and this Saba, this elderly gentleman, chapped the tzī, as we say in Yiddish, and he grabbed the cup and he drank from the wine. And he called him a chacham eina barosha, meaning this is a very smart person. So now we look in the Rashbam and we try to get a sense of what is this Kiddusha Rabbah that's derived from the extra word Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho and is comprised of just one single bracha Borei Pri Hagofen. Then we could go on to the next question, and that is, what was this Saba thinking that he chaptetzi, and before Rav Ashi got a chance to even drink from the cup of wine, he grabs the cup and he drinks from the yain. So if we look in the Rashbam, for those who might have the kuntrus, we're in the fourth kuntrus and the last of the series from Beis Medrash Hagadol on Kiddush. This is the fourth and last of the kuntres. So if you're looking here in the Rashbam, it's the second of the wide lines at the bottom of the page. Omer Rabbi Yehuda, Borei Priya Gofen, Asoi Kosa de Chamra. They brought him a cup of wine. Ubruche umishti. Now, there's an extra word in the Rashbam that I think we're going to have to make a big deal out of. Because one of the questions that we want to ask, which is a question that we spent a lot of time on with regard to Kiddush on Friday night, is shtir, drinking from the kos. How critical is it to drink from the kos? Who has to drink from the kos? How much has to be drunk from the kos? And if somebody comes along and tells me that Kiddusha Rabbah entails Borei Priya Gofen, that's it, without drinking from the kos, I will tell him, at least from the perspective of the Rashbam, which is the first of many, many Rishonim that we want to look at, that that's not enough. It's not enough just to recite a Borei Priya Gofen. You need shtir, so that the drinking of the kos becomes the essential part of the mitzvah of Kiddusha Rabbah, and we're inclined to think, therefore, that if the shtir follows the Borei Priya Gofen, then the Borei Priya Gofen is related to the shtir to form one entity, and that's basically a birchas hanehenim. Why do we do such a thing? Why are we coming on Shabbos day with this derivation from the pasuk Zochar Yom HaShabbos Lekadsho, and we're reciting a Borei Priya Gofen and drinking from the wine? And the Rashbam, in 3 words, lets the cat out of the bag and reveals the secret of the essence of Kiddusha Rabbah, and that is Mishum Kvod Shabbos. Kvod Shabbos. Now we know that there's a mitzvah of Kvod Shabbos. We derive it actually from a pasuk in Nach, in Yeshayahu Novi, and the Novi says to be Mechabe the Shabbos. Okay, I understand to be Mechabe the Shabbos, we wear special clothes, we eat special food, and we organize the entire house and the table. Everything is L'chvod Shabbos. You know, the Bali Kabbalah say it's L'chvod Shabbos HaMalka. The Rambam has L'chvod Shabbos HaMelech. Shabbos is entering, and we have to have kavod for the Shabbos. How do we give kavod for the Shabbos? L'chalek b'midas Shabbos l'midas chol. We have to demonstrate that this day of Shabbos is different than the rest of the days of the chol. And when we're about to embark upon our mitzvah of kvod hayom shel Shabbos, we have to do something that contrasts this day with the other days of the week. And that's going to be reciting a Borei Priya Gofen and drinking a cup of wine. Now, theoretically, you could do that on any day of the week. My mother-in-law, may she rest in peace, we just had our first yahrzeit. She used to tell us in France, where she escaped after the war was over, at every meal they used to start the meal with a glass of French wine. But that's not what we do. Maybe that's a minig in Sarfas, but our minig is that only on special occasions do we take out a bottle of wine as a kickoff to our meal. And that's not something we do during the week, says the Rashbam. We're going to do it in a special, unique way on Shabbos, and that's going to be Kvod Shabbos. Kidei lechalik b'midas chol l'midas Shabbos. That Shabbos is special, and how do we express and demonstrate the special nature of the Shabbos? By beginning our meal with a borei pri hagafen and a shtia of yain. V'hu inyan shir. Now the Rashbam embellishes it. He says that it's not just simply, well, you could have, popped open a bottle of schnapps. Some people do that. You could have started your meal with a little portion of cholent, a shtickle herring. There are many ways in which you could have been mechaber the Shabbos, but we want to be mechaber the Shabbos with shir, with a song of praise to Hashem. So how do we initiate a meal, a Seudah Shabbos, with a shir to Hashem that sets up this meal as a unique meal in contrast to what we eat during the rest of the week? L'chalik b'midas Shabbos l'midas chol, and that's to the shir al hayayin. She'ein omrim shira ela al hayayin. There's a Gemara Psachim here, one blot early on Daf Kuf Hey, that establishes that shir is going to be al hayayin. What is that shir al yayin? That's the borei pri hagafen. We thank Hashem for the yayin, and the yayin becomes the vehicle of shir. And that accomplishment to upgrade our Seudah Shabbos to a level of Kvod Shabbos is comprised of two different actions. Number one, the shir of borei pri hagafen. Number two, the follow-up is going to be the shtia of yayin, the drinking of the wine. And of course, it makes sense that if you're drinking wine, you have to recite a borei pri hagafen, because a birchas hanenim is required before you enjoy the benefit of this world. And thus it comes out, according to the Rashbam, that the borei pri hagafen of Kiddush has two different elements, two different dimensions to it. Number one, the borei pri hagafen is going to be the prologue, or shall we say the matir of Hana, of Shtias Hayayin. So in that sense, the borei pri hagafen is a birchas hanenim par excellence. And at the same time, it accomplishes another goal of shir. But the entire package made up of these two parts, the borei pri hagafen as a birchas hanenim, followed by shtir, together with the borei pri hagafen as a shir to Hashem, that whole package, says the Rashbam, can be reduced to one kiyum mitzvah, one mitzvah act of kvod Shabbos. So l'chvod Shabbos, we, number one, recite a birchas hanenim followed by a shtias yayin, and that makes it midas Shabbos. And number two, the borei pri hagafen is a kiyum of shira, because ein shira el yayin. Together, those two elements, as a complex entity, form Kiddusha Rabbah. We begin to think that maybe the Gemara uses the term Kiddusha Rabbah to indicate the complexity of this Kiddush, that it's made up of these two parts of being nene from yayin and kicking off asuda in a special way over a cup of wine, and number two, to recite the shir of borei pri hagafen al yayin, and that makes it into a Kiddusha Rabbah. So if you ask the question, what motivates, what's the agenda, what's the purpose and the goal of Kiddush by day, the answer is Kvod Hayom. Why don't we find Kvod Hayom at night? After all, there's a mitzvah of Kvod Hayom during the entire 24 hours of Shabbos. And here we have another principle, and that's called Kvod Hayom Adif. So let's say, for example, you have 1 cup of wine. Should you save it for Shabbos, daytime, or drink it Friday night? Let's say you have 1 portion of cholent. When should you eat the cholent? Friday night or Shabbos day? And to our surprise, Chazal understood that Kvod Hayom Adif, the daytime is greater than the nighttime. You might have said just the opposite. After all, the kickoff, the Knisas HaShabbos is at night. Maybe that's more important than the day. No. The culmination of Kiddusha Shabbos is by day. And that's called Kvod Hayom Adif. The Kvod Hayom is greater and it supersedes the covet at night. And so we have this Kiddusha Rabbah for the great covet of the day that supersedes the covet of the night. And the Rashbam says that kavod is called the Kiddusha Rabbah, made up of two parts. Number one, the Bori Priyagofen, which culminates with Shtiyas Yayin. And number two, the Shira Al Hayayin. Now the question is, well, who has to drink the wine? And the Rashbam says, Kiddusha Rabbah Bori Priyagofen, and he says, "V'agid ve'herich boladas im yisharev echad mehem lishtos ubekach yavin debori priagof regilum lomar v'sulo." Rav Ashi looked around and he delayed to see if anyone would drink from the cup of wine. He himself apparently was vacillating. He had doubts in his mind whether the shtia is critical. And when this Saba, Rabbah, his great-grandfather, came forward, and maybe he was a great scholar, and he drank from the wine, we learned two things. Number one, Rav Ashi understood that Kiddusha Rabbah requires shtia, as we saw in the Rashbam. And number two, the shtia does not have to be that of the Mekadesh, it could be the shtia of somebody else. Joe.
Sorry, just if we're understanding that the shira, this shira and this kavod has got to do with wine, then really, would you not say that everyone should actually be drinking? It's not.
I would
it's
say
not
the following: that one shir for the entire misubim, for the entire household of people who are listening, would be sufficient. No need for each person to have his own shira. But as far as shtia is concerned, to be machabe the Shabbos by drinking wine at the beginning of Yesuda could be, and I would advocate in favor of your position, Joe. I don't usually agree with you, so this is one of those exceptions that maybe every single person should be drinking. We don't know exactly whether Rav Ashi drank from the kos. We do know that somebody jumped up and drank from the kos, and that chacham, who's Eino Barosho, was smart enough to figure out, to decipher the secret of Kiddush by day, Kiddusha Rabbah, that it requires shtia. It doesn't mean that only one person will drink from the kos. But as I said last week, if you remember, I gave you the example of a shul down south. What would it mean if every single person has to drink from the wine? If you had a Kiddush, the likes of which they have in Machziki Adas, in Toronto, you would have to have bottles and bottles of wine. And I don't know if the rabbis would be so excited about that. Everybody's.
I understand, but the way the Rav's explaining it, it seems like the shira is on everyone.
Correct, but one shira certainly is enough for everyone. It doesn't mean that everyone has to recite the shir. The shir has to be recited over a cup of wine on behalf of everyone at the table.
Okay.
The question is shtia. That's very, that's something that evades me. It's elusive. I don't know if one person's shtia is enough or each person requires shtia on his own in order to be machabi the Shabbos. And if you take a look at the Ritva, which again, I'm afraid to announce the page because you have a more advanced version, but in my book, it's on page Ches. You'll tell me what page it's on. It's the very next page after the Rashbam. And he says, Pirish Rashbam Zal, Asoi Kosa Bechamru Birche Bishtei Binei, Mishum Kvoda Shabbos L'chalik B'midas Shabbos Midas Cholshu Inyan Shir. Okay, fine. And then he writes, Kosav Hari Karkusha, V'nira Shehu Kibirchas Hanenim B'alma. Now watch these words quoted by the Ritva. He's assuming in the Rashbam's frame of reference, since shtia is so critical to Kiddusha Rabbah, and that sets up the Kvod Hayom, therefore, the bracha Bar Priyagofen is a birchas hanenim. You can't enjoy shtia, which is exactly what you want to do now, is to kick off the Suda Shabbos with shtias yayin without a birchas hanenim. You be nena mina olam hazeh b'lo bracha, which you can't do. And he says there's an afkamina. Dim yotza ein emotzi. Imagine, I made Kiddush before you came in. Maybe in shul, maybe at home. I already was Yotze Kiddush. Can I recite Kiddush now, a Bar Pri Hagafen, on your behalf because you have not recited Kiddush? And what's the answer? No, I cannot make Kiddush on your behalf. Why not? Because the bracha of Bar Pri Hagafen is a birchas hanenim, and the overriding rule that applies to birchas hanenim is that I can make a birchas hanenim on your behalf, but only if I need that birchas hanenim, meaning if I'm going to be nana. But if I already was Yotze Kiddush, I have no intention to drink another cup of wine. Baruch Hashem, I had enough wine in shul. Then I can't make Kiddush for you. Because the rules that govern the Bori Pri Hagafen of Kiddush are the rules that govern Birchas Hanenim. And if I'm not going to drink from the wine, I can't make a bracha on your behalf. You have to make your own bracha. And again, I'm not paskening halacha l'maisa, but if all we have here in front of us is the Rashbam and the Ritva, then we come to the conclusion that once you've made Kiddush, and you want to make Kiddush for somebody else on his behalf with a Borei Pri Hagafen, you cannot do so unless you yourself are going to drink from the wine. And if you have no intention of drinking from the wine, then you cannot recite the bracha on Yenim's behalf. And now we move on to Tosfos. Now, Tosfos on this daf is actually the fourth Tosfos and the last Tosfos on the page. There are a lot of Tosfos in here in Pesachim Kuf Vav and Aleph, but we're looking at Havigachin V'Shasi. Tosfos has a sugya in Brachos on Daf Mem Vav. And the sugya addresses the following question. The two of us are sitting at a table, and we both want to drink wine. Both of us. Let's say you'll make the bracha of Borei Pri Hagafen, and I'm going to drink the wine. You'll also drink wine. But the Gemara in Masechta Brachas Memzai wants to know who's allowed to drink wine first. You're the one who's making the bracha of Borei Pri Hagafen. Can I drink the wine before you? And the Gemara establishes that that the first person to taste from the wine has to be the Mevarech himself. And Tosfos understood in the story of Rav Ashi, with that Saba Rabbah, that elderly person, is that Rav Ashi looked to see what this man was doing, and the man was already bending over and drinking from the wine before Rav Ashi drank from the wine. And by the rules that govern Birchas Hanenim, how could Rav Ashi allow that to happen? How could the Saba grab the wine first when the halacha is that the Mevarech Toem Rishonim? The Eina Mesubim Rashoim Litom Ad Sheyitom HaMevarech. And Tosfos now is going to deviate from the path of the Rashba based on this kash. Tosfos is going to offer a different understanding of Kiddusha Rabbah. And it means that we're not operating with a Borei Pri Hagafen under the laws and the rules that govern the Birchas Hanenim. The Rashbam could not be right. Because if the Rashbam is correct under the laws of Birchas Hanenim, then no one would have the rights to drink from the kos yayin before the mavarech. He's got to kick it off. He's got to be the first one. Aval Kiddush, says Tosfos, in the first of the wide lines, Ein chovo lishtos hamavarech. The mavarech doesn't have to drink from the kos. Do you see where Tosfos is deviating and rejecting the entire approach of the Rashbam? The Rashbam put all the emphasis in Kiddusha Rabbah on the shtia, and Tosfos says we don't require shtia samavarech, and if ain't tzarich lahamtin, nobody has to do it. When the mavarech must drink from the kos, which applies to every birchas hanenim, you can't have a birchas hanenim without the mavarech drinking and being nene, then he has to be first, and we have to wait for him. But if it's not a birchas hanenim, but rather we're reciting the Borei Pri HaGofen as a birchas hamitzvah, as a birchas hachova, as kiddush, then there's no requirement that the mavarech drink from the cup. And I've seen this many times, maybe you have as well, where somebody recites kiddush, gives out the wine to others, and he himself doesn't even drink. And that would comply with the sheet of Tosfos, that the birchas hayayin in Kiddusha Rabbah during the day does not require that the mavarech drink from the kos. And the bracha is therefore not a birchas hanenim. And if it's not governed by the rules that govern birchas hanenim, then somebody other than the mavarech could drink from the kos, not even waiting for the mavarech at all to drink from the kos. And that's the story here of the Saba. So this is a radical departure from the Ritva, who interpreted the Rashbam as shtia being essential to the mitzvah of Kiddush on daytime. I'm talking about Kiddush Rabbah. And the bracha of Borei Pri HaGofen as a birchas hanenim on the shtia. So as we said before, birchas hanenim followed by shtia as one entity. And then we have the question, how could the Saba have drunk before Rav Ashi? And that remains an outstanding question. And based on that kasha, Tosfos comes to the conclusion that the Mekadesh does not have to drink from the wine. And he could be Mekayim the mitzvah of Kiddush in a way that is totally different than a Birchas Hanenim, where no one else is allowed to drink until the Mavarech drinks. No. Tosfos says that for Kiddusha Rabbah, the Mesubim are allowed to drink first, because the Mekadesh himself does not have to be Toem. He's not required to drink from the Kiddush. And therefore, the Borei Pri HaGofen, according to Tosfos, takes on a whole different category, a whole different nature. It's not to be governed, classified, and defined as a Birchas Hanen.
But is Tosfos as well saying that somebody has to drink by the story?
It's very hard for me, Joe, to answer your question. Tosfos doesn't indicate who has to drink. Does anybody have to drink? And we're going to have to understand that according to Tosfos, if Birchas Borei Pri HaGofen is a Birchas HaMitzvah, Birchas HaChova, and therefore the Mavarech doesn't have to drink, and it's not governed by the rules of Birchas Hanenim, does somebody have to drink? Tosfos doesn't address that. The impression you get is that somebody does have to drink, and that's why the Saba jumped up, offered himself voluntarily to be the one to drink from the yayin. But it's not clear exactly what is the nature of that shtia. But maybe Rabbi Kiva Eger will shed a little bit of light on Tosfos. And again, just to quote my particular Kudris, if you could tell me in yours, it's on page Yud, the very next page. And this is a sefer called the Drush V'Chidush. Have you ever heard of it? It was published during the lifetime of Rabbi Kiva Eger by his son, Reb Shlomo Eger. I happen to be a proud owner of a copy of the Drush V'Chidush that was published by Reb Shlomo Eger. It's a very special collector's item. Everybody wants to get a hold of one. Because when Reb Shlomo Eger wanted to publish his father's Chiddushim, he ordered special paper with a watermark that says Eger on it. So you take this book and you put it up to the light and you'll see it says Eger. The next time you're in Ramat Beit Shemesh, believe neder, I'll show it to you if you don't break any ribs. So in any event, he says the following. Behamotzi, in the case of Hamotzi Lechem in Haaretz, which is a Birchas Hanenim, or for that matter, Bar Pri Hagofen, Tzorech Hamavarech Lechel. Right? That's what we said is the rule of Birchas Hanenim. The Mavarech has to be nene. He has to eat from the bread or drink from the wine. Avol Kiddush, in contrast, Kiddush, and he's referring to Kiddusha Rabbah during the day, Ein Chovel HaMavarech Lishtos. He quotes Tosfos that the Mavarech doesn't have to drink. We're not dealing with the Birchas Hanenim. If it were, then the Mavarech would have to drink. But Tosfos says the Mavarech doesn't have to drink. That's why the Saba jumped up and he drank. Fahainu, he says the following. So therefore the bracha in Birchas Hanenim is for the Mavarech, otherwise he can't make the bracha. He can't make the bracha justified for the sake of somebody else. It's got to be for the Mavarech. And therefore he has to eat, and not only that, he has to eat first. In the case of Hamotzi, in the case of Bar Pri Hagofen, he has to drink, and he has to be the first one to drink. That's within the framework of Birchas Hanenim. Aval b'Kiddush, listen to the words of Rabbi Kivega, dahavi birchas ha-mitzvos. Not like we saw in the Ritva interpreting the Rashbam, that Bar Pri Hagofen is a birchas hanenim to allow you to drink from the wine, which is the main mitzvah of Kvod Hayom, of Kiddusha Rabbah, but rather it's a birchas ha-mitzvah. It is the essence of the Kiddush, in and of itself. And therefore, as a birchas ha-mitzvah, yochol u'mevorach b'shvil acherim, v'ein tzorach lishtos. Wow. Rabbi Kivega says explicitly what we were understanding between the lines in Tosfos, that the bracha of Bar Pri Hagofen in Kiddush by day, according to Tosfos, is a birchas ha-mitzvah, and it doesn't require shtia. And therefore, for sure, the Saba could jump up and drink the wine before the Mavarech drinks from the wine. And therefore, Yochel Levarech B'Shvil Acherim. Even if the Mavarech has no intention of drinking from the wine, it's a Birchas HaMitzvah. And a Birchas HaMitzvah, this was the sugya, if you remember, in Rosh Hashanah Chavtes, that we studied in the previous countries, that somebody could be Motzi me in a Birchas HaMitzvah, even though he doesn't need that brach at all. And now we're classifying and defining Birchas Bar Pri Hagofen in Kiddusha Rabbah by day as a Birchas HaMitzvah. And therefore the Mavarech doesn't need to drink. The Ein Tzorach Lishtos, HaMavarech Li'atzma, the Mavarech doesn't have to drink. Wow. So Rabbosai, what we're seeing unfolding in front of our eyes when we're asking the question, what is the nature of Kiddusha Rabbah, are two polar extremes, two roads that diverge in the yellow wood that are lokar of zel zekol alayla. According to the Rashbam, as the Ritva understands the Rashbam, Birchas Bar Pri Hagofen in Kiddusha Rabbah is a Birchas Hanenim. And the Mavarech would certainly have to drink from the kos. And if that's the Rashbam Shita, we still have an outstanding question, which we cannot answer. In the case of Rav Ashi's Kiddusha Rabbah Bechoza, why was the Saba able to jump ahead and drink from the kos first? Because we are governed and restricted by the laws that operate in Birchas Hanenim, and the first person to drink has to be the Mavarech himself. And now we have a sheet of Tosfos on the other extreme, and Tosfos, the way Rabbi Kivega understood Tosfos, classifies and defines Birchas Bar Pri Hagofen in Kiddusha Rabbah not as a Birchas Hanenim at all, but rather as a Birchas HaMitzvah. It is the essence of the mitzvah to such extent that the Mavarech doesn't have to drink from the wine. We still have your question, Joe. which unfortunately Rabbi Akiva doesn't address. Does somebody have to drink from the wine? The impression is that yes, somebody has to drink from the wine, but it doesn't have to be the Mavarech. If it was a Birchas Hanenim like the Rashbam, it would have to be the Mavarech, and not only that, no one would be allowed to drink before the Mavarech, which is not the case in Kiddusha Rabbah. And now Rabbosai, to make life a little bit more interesting, with regard to Kiddusha Rabbah, we study the Ran in Psachim, in Arvei Psachim. And again, that's the next page in my Kiddush. It's on page Yud Aleph. If somebody can tell me what page it's on in yours, I'll be able to announce your pages as well. David, are you there? I don't know. That's
Same page.
Same page? It's on Yud Aleph? Whoa, I lucked out. So I'm going to continue quoting the page numbers as I have it, and you'll tell me if at some point in your kuntres it's different than in mine. So now we're on Yud Aleph, and we're looking at the Ran in Psach. Now, the first question that the Ran addresses is whether Kiddusha Rabbah is d'oraisa or d'rabbanan. Does the Torah require Kiddusha Rabbah? In addition to the Kiddush that we recited Friday night, we need a second Kiddush by day? Or is this a takonis chacham? The Gemara, at first glance, seems to assume it's d'oraisa. We derive it from the extra word yom. Sochas yom HaShabbos l'kadsha. Ein li ela b'knisaso b'yom minayin Talmud lomar bayom. However, as you and I know, very often when Chazal find a ribui, it's what's called an asmachta. And that's what the Ran is, that's the button that the Ran is going to press in. Says the Ran, Ainli ela b'layla b'yom minolan mashma li. He definitely is saying a chiddush because he has the word mashma li. Dahach drosh asmachta b'almahi. In other words, as far as the Torah is concerned, Kiddush at night is sufficient. And the Rabbanan made a takana to require Kiddush by day. The drasha from the extra word yom is only an asmachta. It's a way that the Chachamim, hang their hat on a peg, so to speak. And I'll prove it to you, says the Ran. The Kiddusha Diyamama D'Oraisa, if the mitzvah of Kiddush was during the day. D'Oraisa, Hechi Lo Amrinan Be Elabore Priya Gofen. Number one, how could it be that the D'Oraisa Halacha and the requirement of Minat Torah of Kiddush has no mention of Shabbos? And the entire Kiddush from A to Z comprises just the Bor Priya Gofen. That can't be Kiddush D'Oraisa. Furthermore, Vesu, what is the nature of Bor Priya Gofen? It's a Birchas Hanenim. Sounds and reminds us of the Rashbah that Bor Priya Gofen in Kiddusha Rabbah is a Birchas Hanenim, which means that the Mavarech would have to be Tohem. No one would be able to grab the kos of Yain before the Mavarech. And how could a Birchas Hanenim all of a sudden transform itself magically to a Kiyum D'Oraisa of Kiddush? Can't be. Lav me'ein Kiddusha. It doesn't even remind us of Kiddush, so to speak. Can't be D'Oraisa. Ela Kiddusha D'Oraisa b'layla hi davi b'knisaso. We want to sanctify the day when the day becomes sanctified, namely at night. And that's Kiddusha B'layla. That's the Ikar Kiddusha B'knisasa. That's what the Torah requires. And the substance and the meaning of that Kiddush is all about Kiddusha Shabbos. As we discussed at great length, the essence of Kiddush is Divrei Kilus V'Shevach Al Shabbos, to sanctify the Shabbos. In fact, many Rishonim held that the mitzvah was to sanctify the day, even though the day is sanctified min hashamayim, kviva kaimei. Nevertheless, the Torah requires that we add our own element of Kiddusha to the Shabbos by reciting Kiddush. That has to be b'knisasa. That's when the Kiddusha Shabbos enters. And when it emerges, we have to be Makadish the Shabbos, and that's B'knisasa B'Layla. Hence, the entire bracha of Kiddush at night is all about the sanctity and the special nature of Shabbos. Zeichel Ma'aser Bereishis, but don't forget the discussion that we had with the Minchas Chinuch. It's also Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. So then, what is Kiddush D'Rabbanan? And why did the Rabbanan make this takana? Why weren't they satisfied with the Kiddush D'Oraisa B'Knisaso, which is essentially a mitzvah to recite a bracha of Kiddush? Farvas, is this nishkinud? Why isn't this enough? What motivated the Chachamim to add another Kiddush and then find an asmachta in the Torah? And here the Ran once again sounds awfully familiar, rings an associative bell, reminding us of the Rashba. Ella, so what is Kiddush D'Rabbanan on the day? Mishum dekvod hayom odif mikvod laila. Chachamim saw a little bit of a problem. I'm going to describe it using my language in human terms. Shabbos is a living entity. Shabbos is a personality. In fact, Shabbos is a split personality. It's made up of two personalities. There's the night of Shabbos and the day of Shabbos. Now, whenever you're dealing with a personality, with a being, you have to worry about sensitivities. Isn't that what life is all about? Certainly married life. So there's a sensitivity issue here. Because we're going to recite Kiddush at night. And that gives due honor and respect to the Kiddusha Shabbos of Laila. But, says the Ran, there's another Kiddusha Shabbos, and that's the Kiddusha Shabbos by day. And that Shabbos by day also demands some recognition. It screams out, so to speak, what about my kavod? You gave so much kavod to the night, and you totally ignored me, the Kiddusha by day. In fact, my sanctity, so claims the Kiddusha Hayom of the day, is even greater than the sanctity of Kiddusha Shabbos Balayla. And the proof is in the pudding, because Chazal say Kvod Hayom Adif. It's more important to give cover to the Shabbos by day than by night. And now we have a problem. I'll call it a real human problem. Because on the one hand, the Torah says recite Kiddush at night. On the other hand, the Torah tells me that the Kiddusha and the kavod of Shabbos supersedes that of the night. And therefore, the Kiddusha of Yom screams out, what about my kavod? Are you not going to be Mechabe me, Kiddushas Hayom? When the Kiddushas Hayom of Shabbos is even greater, and the cholent is even tastier, as Gershon points out. When we eat it by day, that depends whether you like a liquid cholent or a dry cholent, whatever it might be. But we eat the cholent by day, and Kvod Hayom Adif. But that's not enough. We need some element of Kiddush by day. We, so to speak, have to tip our hats to the Kiddushas Hayom by giving it some element, even a vestige of Kavod Hayom. Says the Ran, Elamishum de Kavod Hayom Adif Mikvod Alayla Ro Chachamim Lasas Bayom Zecher LeKiddush. Whoa, a new concept. The Ran is coining a new phrase, a new terminology. Zecher LeKiddush. We need a Zecher LeKiddush. And Kiddush itself is a Zecher. Zocher is Yom HaShabbos. So on Friday night, the Torah requires to remember the Shabbos by singing its praises with an entire bracha. And now, after having remembered the Shabbos at night, we have to do something to remember the Shabbos by day, because Kvod Hayom Adif and the cover that we have to give to the day is even greater than that of night. So you need a Zeichel Kiddush. What's going to be that Zeichel Kiddush? Says the Ran. Ro Chachamim Lasos Bayom Zeichel Kiddush V'hainu Borei Priya Gofen V'sulo Shehu Hascholas Kiddush Alalayla. You know, we always debate whether the Ikar is at the beginning or at the end. We have a principle called Sof Ma'aseh Machshava Tchila. So we go back to the beginning of Kiddush, and we look for the beginning of Kiddush, and that's going to be a Zeichel Kiddush. And that beginning of Kiddush will allow us to give due respect and honor to the day of Shabbos by beginning Kiddush by day. We don't have to finish the Kiddush. Everything in here is in that one Tchilas HaKiddush, which will accomplish a Zeichel Kiddush. But both sides, did you ever hear this in your life? I never heard this. You gentlemen are greater scholars than I am. But did you ever think in your mind that when you recite Kiddush during the day, that's a Zeichel Kiddush? That you do a Hascholas Kiddush? Did it ever occur to you that the reason why you do so is because Midrabanan, the Rabbanan made a takana? Did it ever occur to you, and I say this with all passion because it never occurred to me, that we need Kavod Hayom because Kavod Hayom is greater than Kavod Halayla? And that the Kavod Hayom of Shabbos cries out, give me some sort of recognition. And the Rabbanan established that that recognition, which is going to be the Kavod Hayom, is going to be the Tchilas HaKiddush of the regular Kiddush at night, and the Tchilas HaKiddush, the kickoff of Kiddush, is Borei Pri HaGofen. V'od, the Lefi She'ein Omrim Shira El Yayin, is Kevon Shemavarchem Al Yayin Tchila, Shalom Kederech Shara Sudos, sounds very familiar, sounds like the Rashbam, Havi Ki Ein Shevach V'Shira L'Kedushaso Shel Yom. The Shira of Borei Pri HaGofen Al Yayin is a kiyum of Shevach V'Shira L'Kedushaso Shel Yom. Whoa, Rabbosai. Where is the Shevach and the Shira of Kiddush Hayom? Where are we singing the praises of the sanctity of the day? At the end, all we did is say, thank you, God, for creating the vineyards and the product of the vineyards. And that's Shira and Shevach L'Kedushaso Shel Yom. And the Ran says yes, because it's a Shira Al Yayin. And that Shira Al Yayin sings the praises of Shabbos. You could hear Shlomo Kalbach in the back of your ears saying, sing the song of Shabbos. You remember that? You guys are too young for Shlomo Kalbach. But anyway, so we sing the song of Shabbos. And the song of Shabbos is Borei Pri HaGofen. If somebody said that in my classroom, I would tell them, get out of here. But the Ran says it. That the Borei Pri HaGofen, which is Shir Al Yayin, is a Shir V'Shevach L'Shabbos, U'L'Kedushaso Shel Yom. It's the Tchilas Kiddush, and it was established by the Rabbanan in order to fulfill the kiyum of Kvod Hayom Adif. Umishum de lo havi elad Rabbanan lo ro lahavich bo Yosef kidei shelo lashvoso l'kedusha shel layla. There's such a paradox here. The Rabbanan were very careful. On the one hand, they wanted to give us a me'ain Kiddush, some sort of Zeichel Kiddush, and they chose the Tchilas Kiddush. But on the other hand, they couldn't fear us. They couldn't add the extra paragraph of explicit Shir V'Shevach for the Kiddush Shabbos, because if they did so, it would be exactly identical to the Kiddush that we make on Friday night. And the Kiddush on Friday night is D'Oraisa, whereas the Kiddush by day is only D'Rabbanan. So the Rabbanan were, how should I say, tiptoe through the tulips. You know, they've been very sensitive, walking between the eggshells. On the one hand, they wanted to give due kavod with a kind of a Kiddush to Shabbos by day, and that's called Zeichel Kiddush. But on the other hand, they couldn't go all the way, because if they go too far and they give you the entire Kiddush with the explicit Shir V'Shevach L'Shabbos that we recite on Friday night, then we have no difference between Kiddush D'Rabbanan by day and Kiddush D'Oraisa by night. They had to find a distinction so that we wouldn't confuse and come to the mistaken conclusion that Kiddush by day, like Kiddush by night, is D'Oraisa. So what they did was they made a Me'ain Kiddush, a Zeichel Kiddush, with Shir ala Yayin, and that Shir constitutes Shevach v'Shira l'Kedushas shel Yom. It's a kiyum of Kedushas Hayom and Kavod Hayom, and it's called Kiddusha Rabbah l'Kinu l'fi she'eno ikar k'Kiddush halayla. V'zuta shi'ura k'dekarina l'suma sagino. Everybody knows that in the Talmud, a blind person is called a sagi nor. He has a lot of light. He has no light. It's total darkness. We call it in English a euphemism. And the borrowed term of Kiddusha Rabbah is a euphemism because the Kiddush by day is a truncated Kiddush. It doesn't have any explicit mention or formulation of Shir v'Shevach l'Kedushas HaShabbos, but yet it's a great Kiddush. It's the Hascholas HaKiddush. It's the Kavod Hayom of Shabbos. It's Shir al Yayin, which gives it the status of Shir v'Shevach LaShabbos. So we'll call it the Great Kiddush, as a euphemism for the fact that it's only got the beginning of Kiddush, the Borei Pri Hagaf. This, my friends, is the complex picture of Kiddusha Rabbah according to the Shitas Hara. So, B'li Neder, next week we'll try to finish this all up. We'll begin with a summary of the Ran, very complicated understanding of Kiddusha Rabbah, and I'll take this opportunity to wish you a Chodesh Tov, a good Chodesh Menat, the Misha Nichnas Adar we need. I don't know if the Simcha may be pushed off till the Adar of Karav L'Nisan, that's the second Adar, Karav L'Geula, Samchin and Geula, but whatever it is, we're going to be Machmir, and we're going to ask Hashem for the Simcha of Adar starting this Friday night and Shabbos day. So I'll wish you all a great Chodesh Adar.
Sure.
Thank you.
Rav, thank you. Regards from Bobby. He apologizes. He's down in Florida, so he
Okay,
couldn't
look,
make it.
I don't know why anyone at this time of the year would go down to Florida. Like, that's like if you got to be sick in the head to leave Toronto, the Halig of Toronto, for Florida. And the truth be told, I was ill for a week with the flu. I don't know if you caught it in my voice last week.
Oh yeah.
And I was dreaming of going down to Florida. But you know, we're living through a very rough period of time here, as you know. And it's a bit hard for me to enjoy Florida the way I would like to enjoy Florida. And maybe if I want to punish myself, instead of going to Florida, I would go to South Africa, Yamach Shemam. Okay, then. Have a good day.